Welcome to Dutchess and Her Dukes, a podcast where I speak to tunnel vision New Yorkers who do what they gotta do to pursue their dreams. I'm Dutchess, and these are my Dukes. Hi, today my guest is Alberto Mena, an elite long-distance runner who has multitude of achievements in running, one of which is coming 18th in the New York City Marathon in 2022, which was, I think, the hottest and the most humid of Novembers ever. And most recently, Albie participated in the US Olympic Team Trial Marathon. Hello, Albie.
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, good. Yeah. Also, Albie is my coach, running coach. So how did you get into running?
Well, I mean, that's not that long of a story, but there's some stuff to it. The main thing was I kind of, growing up, I didn't really play sports. I kind of just played in the park and whatnot. And then, my mom, I grew up very close to the Armory in Washington Heights, and that's kind of like an indoor track facility, like world-class facility, and they would have kind of like a youth program for kids, middle school, youth. And my mom just signed me up because she always wanted to be active, and then I kind of did that for a little bit, and there you can do like sprints, jumps, throwing, like all the track events, and I did it for a little bit, and I just kind of was never really into sports like when I was really little, so I stopped doing it. And then when I was later on in like middle school, like towards the end of my middle school, there was another after school track program, and I did that again, but it wasn't very serious. And then, so like I kind of had a bit of a foundation and familiarity with it, but then it wasn't until high school where I kind of started seriously. My junior year of high school, I was really my sophomore year, I was starting to kind of grow more and kind of develop, in terms of my body. So I wanted to kind of like get more in shape. So I tried out for, I remember it was in my high school, Xavier High School in Lower Manhattan.
I didn't know that you went there.
Yeah. So there, the big sport in that school was actually rugby, which is kind of like football. That it's popular like in New Zealand and South Africa.
I was a cheerleader for a rugby team in London.
There you go. Yeah. So it's kind of like, for some reason our school was like, that was the sport. So I tried out for it just to get myself up, but I had never played, football or anything like that. So
It's so bizarre that they have rugby.
Yeah, but they're like one of the best schools for it. And I was terrible. Like I couldn't catch the ball. I was like, at that point I was like losing weight because I was like growing. So I was like really skinny, and I ended up like, the guys would pick me up when they would tackle me, and I was just like, it was, and then, but I realized like when I was doing like the sprints and stuff that they would have us do, that I could do it, and I could do it kind of decently well. So I was like, okay, maybe next year I'll try out for cross country. And at that point I didn't even know what cross country was. I just knew it had running involved. And I heard that from other people that was the team that didn't have cuts. Like you kind of just signed up and like you just did it. So that appealed to me because I was like, I got a cut from the rugby tryouts, and then this one was like, I'll do this one. And then from there, I mean, I kind of started off, I wasn't like very good. Like I was like your average high school kind of like JV runner. So I wasn't like a standout like athlete or anything like that. And I got injured a lot of times in high school because I just didn't really know what I was doing, and I kind of like didn't recover, I didn't sleep well. So I didn't have like, that kind of high school career that kind of makes people think that, I can be really good at this. I kind of just had 2 years of it where I would skip practice to kind of visit my girlfriend at the time. And, like, it was like a very casual thing. But I'm the kind of person that like, when I start doing something, I feel like it's a waste of my time if I don't give it my best effort. So it really was like towards the end of my senior year of high school running where I was like, okay, like I've been doing this for a bit and I actually really enjoy it and I really want to get better. So I kind of like start trying more in practice. I started actually going to every practice. I attempted running on my own on the weekends, which was like, it was mandatory, but like no one really did it. But
How many times per week did you run as a high school?
In high school, I mean, I really didn't run much just because I wasn't very aware of how important running on the easy running is. So I was probably running like 20 miles a week tops, and probably I was only running about 4 days a week.
Yeah, I did the same thing when I was in junior high.
Yeah.
It's like 4 times.
Yeah,
the most, or 3.
So it was very casual. Whereas like the runners that are like the kids that are really good in high school, like they're training pretty seriously. Like they're running 40, 60, even 80 miles a week. And
wow.
So like the top kids in my high school team, like they were doing around that. Like they were really like we had some really good kids that got recruited for like D1 universities. And then kind of just being surrounded by those kids that were the best on my team, it inspired me to kind of try to do what they're doing. And then at that point it was too late because it was my last year, but it was like I kind of started trying to train with the faster kids, and I would, it was hard. Like I would get dropped from workouts and stuff, but I kind of was always pushing myself. Yeah. Because I was like, again, I was the average guy on the team. Like our team had probably like 100 kids. And I was like, middle, if not bottom of the barrel in terms of like my ability. But I really liked it. So yeah, and then from there, I ended up going to Fordham University. That's where I went right after Xavier. And then I saw that there was an opportunity for me to potentially be on that team. They were a D1 program. The only thing was that I still wasn't very good yet. So what I did was that I made that my goal to walk on. And if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like for D1 universities, they usually recruit people. They'll give them a scholarship or something like that for them to participate and run on the team. And then walk-ons are just people that they're interested, they want to compete, but they don't really get those benefits. Yeah. And then, I mean, they can if they eventually get really, really good, but it's usually something where a walk-on kind of has to prove themselves. So yeah, man, I really wanted to just pursue it, and I guess some people might say, like, especially looking back on it, like maybe you're a little bit delusional being like a bottom of the barrel kid in high school and you want to be on a Division I team. Like that's a really big gap to jump, especially
like this is the thing, like it's so inspirational. This is what this podcast is about too. Like you can do whatever you want to do if you put your mind into it, and that's beautiful. Like you were not even that good, or like you couldn't catch a ball and you were so skinny that they were lifting you up, and still like you persevered. But let me ask you this: Did you start competing and racing in college?
It was in high school. Like I did like high school track, cross country. And
what distances were you doing?
So in high school, I was a distance runner because that wasn't even like it was my choice, but I got into cross country, which it's basically like in high school they do 5K.
5K. 3K too, or no? In
depends.
Poland, in Europe, they do 3K, 5K.
Yeah, in New York City, they actually do a lot of the 4K at Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, which is it's kind of like its own course, so it's traditionally a 4K there, but also 5K. And then, I didn't even know what cross country was, so I kind of got into that. I remember my first race, we were running, I'm like, when is it going to be over? And the guy's like, dude, we just started. It was crazy, yeah. The first race ever, I sprinted like the first 400 meters, the first like minute of the race, not even knowing how long the race was. And I finished, but I blew up. But yeah, so
my first indoor race, sorry to interrupt, was in junior high school, and it was 1,500 meters, and I was jogging it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So yeah, I started there, cross country, and then basically for the way we have it in New York is you do indoor track, so it meets at like the Armory or the Ocean Breeze facility, and then you do
Armory.
and there's outdoor track as well, and that's you kind of travel to different high schools that have an outdoor track facility, or Icon Stadium in Randall's, they have that there. So in high school I did the 800 mainly, which is like a mid-distance event, like it's in the middle of a sprint and a distance event. And I really liked it in high school because it was kind of like the middle ground where you can kind of run fast, but at the same time, like it's not long enough to where you're like sprinting really hard. Well, to where you're having to kind of pace yourself. In a long race, you have to pace yourself. So you can kind of just go all out and give it what you got, but it wasn't like a short sprint where you had to be really fast. Like I didn't have that natural sprinting ability or turnover, so I kind of had to rely more on my endurance. So it was a good middle ground. So I did the
800. That's what my grandpa and
Yeah.
my uncle did. They were post champions in that.
Now I wasn't I wasn't even very good. My 800 in high school, I think was like a 213 or something, which I don't know if you know the times, but like.
So my grandpa ran at 148.
Yeah, you see the difference. 213 would be like a decent time for a girl in high school. Like that's kind of where I was. But considering that I had only just started, I started late. Like it was kind of promising that I kind of made jumps. Like my times were going down like every other weekend and stuff like that in high school.
Amazing, like very quickly.
Yeah, so but that's kind of like that beginner's, kind of progression. But yeah, so I did the 800. I'm sure I did the mile like 2 or 3 times. Probably ran I think my PR was 5:08 or 5:10 in the mile. So it's like an average, decent time for like an average kid in high school. It's not going to take you to states. It's not going to win any races, but it's all right. And yeah, so I did those 2 events, and then I don't think I ever did anything outside of that. Maybe did the 400 every now and then, like in the relays. Because what my coach would have us do is, especially when you have a lot of kids on the team, especially the kids that aren't very good like me, like he would just put us on relays. So it's kind of very quick to, have 4 kids here, 4 kids there, and everyone gets to race. But it's kind of, more balanced as opposed to having everyone do an individual race, because that just takes too long. But
How did you get into marathon running, and when and how did that transition happen?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing about the marathon, that was much later. So in college, once I trained for a year right after my freshman year of college. I trained and I walked on. So I kind of coached myself. I trained myself that whole year, and I saw a lot of progression because I've always been like a student of the sport, and I kind of took it upon myself to kind of do everything I can to improve. So from high school, my freshman year, I improved enough to where they said, okay, we'll give you a spot to be on the Fordham team. And then I was there for 2 years, and I competed, and I was getting better, but it wasn't like at the rate I wanted, and also like I wasn't also very good. Like in college, I was not running very well relative to everyone else. I moved up in distance, so I was doing now for cross country, we do 8K. Then for the track races, I was doing more like 3K, 10K, so longer. I was moving up in distance because the way it is in running is like if you don't have a lot of that natural speed, like we talk about, like sprint ability, you can kind of move up in distance if you're willing to work really hard and run more miles. Yeah. So I kind of always consider myself as someone that, hey, I might not have that natural like speed that you're born with, but if you put in the miles and you put in the work, you can see growth.
That's what they told me too when I was young. Like I had a really good form just naturally, but then I wasn't as fast as sprinters were. So that means, if she's resilient,
if you're
has
tough,
endurance, you can get it done.
And so that's what I did. So I kind of always saw myself, all right, I'm gonna just keep training, run more miles, and that's kind of where, around that time, I kind of like realized it was really like in 2018, and I was still in college. I was a junior in college. I saw the Boston Marathon, and for like start to finish for the first time, and that was the year where it like rained really hard. I don't know if you remember that year, and it was like
it was very bad.
It was like a lot of the pros dropped out.
Literally, I remember that.
So, and I saw this one guy, Yuki Kawauchi, the Japanese marathoner, who I had been following a little bit, but he was a guy that he worked a regular job. Like he was kind of like, he wasn't like this elite runner that like, he was racing against like the world champion and then Galen Rupp, who's like the American top runner. And he beat all those guys. Like he won the Boston Marathon. And
it's good chills. Literally, this shit is so beautiful.
So I saw that, and it's funny. I skipped class for some reason. I just wanted to watch that race that day, and I skipped class to watch it. And when I saw him win, and I saw also Des Linden win, I was like, hey, like these people are like, they're probably not the most talented, but like in terms of their resiliency, like and their ability to kind of just do as well as they can regardless of the conditions, like. And they won. Like you don't ever see that in any other event in running. Like in any other event, like it's usually the fittest guy or the most talented guy wins. Yeah. But in the marathon,
I feel like a lot of genes.
But in the marathon, a lot of it is the psychology, like your just mental toughness, your ability to deal with like bad conditions. So that's when I kind of decided, okay, maybe the marathon is something that I could be good at one day because, I figured my saying has always been, I might not be able to be the fastest, but like I can be the toughest. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah, I love this so much.
Yeah. So then I right there, I kind of said the marathon's what I want to do, but I kind of thought to myself, it's going to take me a while to build up to that. So in college, I know I kept running, and I wasn't running very well. And then my senior year of college, I decided that I needed to make a change in order for me to start running faster and start running better. So I actually left my college team, and that's where I kind of started, I guess, the marathon build, where I've been coaching myself now the last 4 or 5 years.
See, that's a very interesting point I wanted to raise too, because since the beginning, I guess maybe outside of high school and like a little bit in college, you've been coaching yourself. You said like you took like a year to study. You're you're a learner and like a student of sport, and like how did you figure out the correct way, and like what made you feel so not arrogant but like confident that your way is better than other ways?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always just been someone that I obsess over things. So like even when I was in high school and I was starting to take it seriously, like when I was going from high school to college, that whole summer I was actually injured, and I was just nursing injuries that I developed over the year during high school. And I just started watching a lot of YouTube videos, reading stuff online, you know, emailing people, like just to kind of see like what can I do like when I finally get healthy again, to make sure I can level up and be like a next, you know, make that gap so I can walk onto my team. And I've always just been inspired by the best runners, like what they do. And I figure like what I've come to realize is that the training is all the same. It's just a matter of scaling it to your level. So I would see like, you know, with the top runners, which, you know, back then, and I guess they're like kind of legends now, like Mo Farah, who was like the British champion, who won 5K, 10K many times. David Rudisha, who was like the star 800 runner at the time. Like I watched their documentaries on YouTube like every day. Like that's all I did that summer. And I kind of just over time of just obsessing over that and watching it every day, I kind of like drew similarities. I'm like, okay, this guy, they all seem to do a long run every weekend, and it all seems to be about this duration. So maybe that's something I can implement.
Yeah, instead of mileage, let's work on duration, right? Like that's what you did with my running plans, and I think that's like, sorry to interrupt again, but that's one of your methods, and you can elaborate on that. That's like, you're very like specific and focused on an individual rather than like creating a generic plan, which is there's nothing wrong with it, but I feel like most running coaches do that, and I've experienced that. And the only time I actually felt like I improved significantly was when I was training with you, and I qualified for Boston, and that's because, you know, you were measuring my heart rate every time, and then it was like my running plan was built based on that, and I think that's pretty much like we did maybe learning from others too. Yeah,
well, I mean, to add on to that, like I've kind of developed that when I was trying to like scale, like I said, like the workouts that I've seen these professional athletes do to my ability. I said, okay, I can't go around and run 20 miles, but they're running about roughly 2 hours in that time. So I'm like, maybe for me, 2 hours might be 16 miles. And then I kind of got to, and then now when I coach athletes for the marathon, I'll say, do a 2 hour run, and it's relative to your easy pace. Like it's like, for you, it might be, you know, 14 miles or something like that, depending. So at the end of the day, like it's about the time, because what I've come to realize is that your heart, your lungs, they don't know pace. They don't know distance. What they know is the time that you're out there and how hard you're working. So I kind of like to use that and the heart rate data as a way to kind of like make sure that the effort is dialed in, so that you're not chasing numbers, you're more so chasing an intensity that is all like specific to you, specific to your body, specific to your needs. Yeah,
and I never got injured when I trained with you, because like, you know, I hear from people who are complete amateurs, and like their first marathon, they're doing 22 milers, and then they run two more times that week, like, and their mileage is, let's say, 40 miles a week, but one of those runs is 22. That's crazy. That's what you talk about.
And I hardly do that as well in my own training, just because it's just so much time on your feet. And I think that when you're coaching people, especially that are new to the sport, like I always tell people, it's better to like run less every single day than to kind of just try and do everything on one day and then take 3 days off. Like the biggest thing in running and any really sort of training is just consistency. How much can you consistently run over time, and whatever helps you stay healthy. So if that's 5 miles a day, you run 5 miles a day. but you're running every day. And then over time, you're not going to miss days because you're too tired. You know, you're not going to miss days because you're injured or you get sick, because it's sustainable. And then if you add it up at the end of 4 months, 5 months, a year even, you'll see that you ran more and trained more than when you take those 20-mile days and then you have to take 4 days off because you're too tired.
Yeah.
And then you get hurt because it's too much for your body. So it's something that for me now, like running so much and been so experienced for the last 10 years, it's just something that is very common sense to me. But when someone is new, they kind of just they just kind of Google, you know, marathon training plan. And that's,
facts. That's what I did the first time.
Yeah, that's usually what you find. It's like, oh, you got to run a 20-miler before a marathon. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. Like my first marathon that I ever did a few years ago, like I had only run up to 18 miles.
Albie, do you remember my last marathon in the fall? It was New York City.
Yeah.
My longest run was 16 maybe.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
and
that's
I did pretty good.
Yeah, you did pretty well. It's about, again, trusting the consistency that you built up day by day.
Yeah.
120-miler is not going to, you know, give you a good result. What matters is what you did every day building up to it.
And those hard workouts, right? Those
Yeah,
like
workouts,
tempos and speed workouts on the track. Like
Yeah.
that's everything. Speaking of, like you mentioned being tired, and you also talked about mental toughness. Like, how do you? Because I never heard you complain about anything. There were some crazy stories about your New Jersey marathon. We can talk about that later.
Sure.
But how do you, like, make yourself get out of bed when you're feeling a little under the weather, when you're like pissed off at whatever the world, and like you're not in the mood? Like, what do you do? Because I know you run 7 days a week, so how do you go twice a day, 7 days a week? So how do you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is, you know, that's something that you definitely have to build over time. That discipline is really what it is. And for me, it always just stems down to the fact that I have big goals in the sport and I want to accomplish big things. So like for me, for instance, when I was training to qualify for the Olympic trials marathon, that's what motivated me every day. I told myself, yeah, sure, I don't feel good every day, and you know, I got a lot of things going on in my life. I'm traveling. There's been days where I'll run twice a day even after flying. So for me, it's just a matter of, I've come down to, like, I always tell myself, like, the goal, right, does not care about what happened. Like, there's no, like the goal, like, your dreams in life, they don't really care about what you had to go through. You know, if you were sick, if you were, you know, feeling bad, if things were, like, it doesn't matter. Like, life is not fair to you in that way.
Nobody cares. Like, that's the thing. I said this many times. Like, my clients, for example, like my little PR business, like, nobody fucking cares that I was tired or that I had like personal shit going down and my dog got sick. Nobody cares, even though those things are valid. At the end of the day, what counts is the results.
The results and the work that you put in, you know, to make those results happen. So for me, it's about, yes, you have to be sensitive to yourself at times and kind of like, you know, say, okay, you know, I don't feel well, but you have to acknowledge, you have to be able to just determine the difference between feeling bad and it being a good decision not to run, or you're just being lazy, or you're just being, you know, weak-minded.
I've always been like, feel like I'm pretty much weak-minded. Whenever I skip the work, I was like weak-minded. Yes, I'm tired, but like if you got out there, you can even do like 3 miles, not 5, and like still be okay.
And what I consider to be the real training, and this is something that I kind of use for my own, I guess, psychological approach to it, and just when I work with other athletes, is like, for me, like those days, I always tell myself, this is like my mantra basically. The days that you don't want to do it are the days that really count.
Everybody should listen to this. And it's not just about like running, it's
no,
about
it's
music and art and writing, everything. Those are
because it's, you know, it's easy to like go out and train when it's a nice, you know, 60-degree day.
You feel like it,
But I mean, like, that's, you know, if you want to be a champion, or if you want to just accomplish your goal, whatever it might be, you know, it's not going to be easy, and that's the real test. Like, I'm a firm believer that, like, when something is worthwhile and something has a lot of meaning behind it, it's not going to be easy. And if it's easy, I think there's a problem.
I literally cried, I think maybe today or yesterday about my book, because it's like, I still see like errors and like, but it's like, if it was, and last night, I think I was writing till like 11:30 and my eyes were like closing. And I didn't want to do it.
But that's where the growth happens. So like, for me, it's like, if it were easy, everyone would do it. If it were easy, everyone would run a marathon. Everyone would be in the Olympic trials, or, you know, be in the Olympics, or write books and make, you know, be successful. But that's what separates you. So for me, like, when I'm training and There's been days where I go around 1 a.m. and I'm running because I had a busy day, and I'll still get it in. Like, I'm like, this is where...
You're an evening runner, aren't you? You like to run in the evenings. I know we talked about that.
But I'm like, this is the training right now. Like, no one, like, I like to kind of think and I like to train alone a lot, so I'm like, you know, no one's out here doing this.
Yeah.
No one's out here.
I like that too, honestly. I was never great at, I was never a great team, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not a team player. Yeah.
I don't really have many friends. No, it's like, sometimes it's nice, but I like training myself by myself, and there's no bigger high to all of you people who do drugs. There's no bigger high than going out in the rain, doing the hardest tempo workout on the track, and then like feeling so accomplished.
You feel badass after.
That's the best feeling in the world.
And for me, like for running, it's like I always almost like, if I can do that, if I can get up and run when it's snowing and when it's 100 degrees outside, it's like it's a good mental training for life, in my opinion. Because it's like, so then what can't you do?
Yeah.
Like if you can go out and run a marathon and run really well, like then, in my opinion, like doing something like going to work and dealing with my boss or whatever it is, like that's easy in comparison, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I like to view running as like, for me at least, training for life, training for my life, teaching me to be disciplined, teaching me how to face adversity. It's just something that for me, I keep learning from it. Like I don't ever stop learning from my running journey.
That's so beautiful.
Albie,
what do you think about when you run?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things. It's usually like I run a lot, so like just some perspective.
Can you tell everyone how much you run on an average, and then maybe you can like talk about how much you run before the races?
Yeah, so I mean, for the last few years now, since I kind of started taking the marathon more seriously, I bumped up my mileage. So I regularly run over 100 miles a week. For me, honestly, like 100 is like, if not even, if anything, it's kind of easy.
Yo.
I'll usually
miles
run.
A week isn't easy.
Yeah, I'll usually run like when I'm in peak marathon training, and I'm training, like for instance, when I was running for the training for the Olympic trials, I was running like 140, 150, 160 at times. And that's with structured workouts, and that's with other things. Like I'm not a professional runner. Like I have other things to do. I have a job, I have relationships, etc. So for me,
you are a professional runner. You went to the like Olympic trials. Come on. But
well, I don't. My thing is like that's not all I do, and I don't
I
can't live off running. So I'm an amateur like in that sense of it. But yeah, I treat it like a professional, because the way I see it is like if I want to be competing with these guys, if I want to line up at the Olympic trials and there's actual professionals there, that is their life. Yeah. I don't have an excuse of I have a job, or I have...
Again, nobody cares.
Nobody cares. So I'm going to train just like them. And if anything, my training, I think, is harder because I have to balance those other things.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, like what I think about... So I run a lot, again, usually twice a day. And peak training, it's up to about 2.5 to 3 hours of total running a day. So maybe like an hour and a half in the... usually an hour run, and then maybe over an hour and a half later on. I like to do a good half of it, like the first run, or at least one of the runs during the day on the treadmill. And on the treadmill, I feel like that's where I really think a lot because there's not much going on. So it's like, I don't have to think about my pace. I don't have to think about where I'm going. You know, there's no sights. You know, it's just like me, the TV or whatever, usually no TV, usually just like a window or something, and my headphones. So I'll be listening to music, you know, trying to kind of jam out. But that's kind of like, I think for me at least, where I think a lot about my goals, or kind of maybe daydream or visualize my goals. So like when I was training for the Olympic trials to qualify, for probably the whole 2 months where I was in heavy training for that race, I was visualizing the race. I was like, okay, it's gonna be, if it's cloudy, this is how I'm gonna react. If I'm in a pack and it's 5 miles to go, that's where I'm going to make my move, and that's where I'm going to make my push. And I kind of just visualize, you know, successfully achieving my goal. You know, someday, and that's like when I have an immediate goal in mind, that's what I'll do. I'll be like on the treadmill especially, I kind of just visualize doing what I want to do. And that's actually like a sports psychology technique. It's imagery, visualization. But I kind of just do it naturally. Like I don't, like, it's not something that I force, like it's something that I just find myself doing. And then other times, like when I'm just like, right now, for instance, I'm kind of taking some downtime. So I'm kind of having to find, ways to motivate myself when I don't have an ending goal in mind. When I go on the treadmill now, like I did earlier today, I'm like visualizing 4 years down the line. What I want to be, like me running, potentially at the Olympics or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Just having something to aim towards.
Yeah, we'll go 4 years because Paris is this year.
And when I was 4 years ago, when I was 2020, I was visualizing running in the trials, and 4 years later,
yes.
it happened. So for me, that's treadmill. That's what I think about. And when I'm outside, it could be a little bit different. When I'm outside, you're kind of having to battle the elements, hills, etc. So
pay attention to what's going on, traffic, and like.
So usually, I remember a good thing like when now that we're in summer, it's July, it's like very hot in New York. When I go out for runs, if I'm not listening to music or anything like that, I'm usually thinking about just kind of like if it's hard, like if it's a hard day, I'll think about like this is training, like you want it to be hard. Like if it's not hard, you're not gonna get better.
Embrace, I read this book, like embrace the pain, come here, and then like I used to think that when I was running track, like I love pain, I'm embracing pain, literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just a matter of like embracing that pain, like you said, and then also I always have this kind of like imagery that I kind of like have in my mind where it's kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with like the myth of Sisyphus.
Sure.
So for people that are not familiar, it's there's this myth that is also related to like existentialism and absurdism, which is a whole other can of worms, like philosophy. But it's basically the image of a guy who is condemned by the Greek gods because he tried to outsmart them, and his punishment was for eternity he has to roll a boulder up a mountain, and he rolls it up and then it falls back down. And then when he gets to the top, he has to kind of look at it fall back down, and then he has to do it again. And it's just like a repeated cycle. So for me, when I'm running on a hot day like July, like I always kind of have that thought in the back of my mind that that's me rolling the boulder up.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so funny that you mentioned that because actually in my book, in the very beginning, I think I described Dutchess and her Sisyphean works, which is like emails, just like money, but it's more absurdist. Actually, my book is pretty absurdist. And I too wanted to share with you like a quick passage from my novel where Dutchess is running her first marathon. So I'm just gonna read it real quick since this is about my book promo, right?
Yeah, awesome.
She's not as deep as you. The character is very shallow, but here we go. Running along the Rockaway boardwalk overlooking the ocean, Dutchess is thinking about Grandpa. Would he be proud of her this time, even though she would never be as fast as he was, even though she would never win a race? Would he say anything at all? What do you need this for? It's not like you're going to the Olympics, he would murmur most likely if she came back home with the finisher's medal, the medal that means nothing to anyone who understands competitive sports. But maybe deep down he'd be proud knowing that she'd followed in his footsteps. The morning sun is shining on her face while she's trotting along, and she feels something close to gratitude, a lump in her throat, a teardrop. Stay hard, screams Maria, with a banner showing the face of David Goggins. You got this, yells a redhead in a tracksmith suit. The navy blue matches his hair, thinks Dutchess. You're eating the miles like Pokemon, says some random girl. Dutchess finishes 26.2 miles very thirsty, completely dehydrated. In fact, despite all the gels and Gatorade cups she picked up from the volunteers on the boulevard. At least she doesn't need to pee, glass half empty. The feelings of excitement and love will dissipate once the adrenaline and endorphins wear off. But it was a good feeling for as long as it lasted.
I can definitely relate to some of that.
I mean, this is obviously fiction, but while like one is racing, there's just like, I think it's so interesting for me even to observe my thoughts later, like what I was thinking about. And it's so funny you mentioned Sisyphus too, because when I was running Chicago, I kept thinking of myself as like mythological, like semi-goddess running to like save like the Greeks from the war, like the first.
Sometimes that's all it is. You kind of have to kind of like create these fantasies to kind of like make you do exceptional things. Sometimes that's how exceptional things are done. You have to kind of have a belief outside of yourself to believe it's possible. Like, you know, a lot of people they might be religious, they lean on that.
Yeah.
For some other people, it might be like trying to prove something to themselves or other people. But I'm a firm believer in like, you have to believe in yourself even when no one does, and you have to almost be delusional in the sense that like, if you want to be a star athlete, you got to just believe that you're already the star athlete, and you just have to prove it to everyone else. Like, you have to have the belief that you already are that person. Like, if you don't believe in that at the very beginning, like, you're not going to get it done.
Yeah, also most successful people, whether it's artists or athletes or I don't know, like CEOs, they're literally delusional. Like, that's why, and they're so, you have to be selfish too. You have to be so selfish that you block everything out, which brings me to my next question about your life in general. Like, shout out to Jackie, who was very patient, girlfriend. But like, what do you need to sacrifice in terms of like running? Because you run twice a day, and you have a job. Like, what else do you have to?
I mean, for me,
in a day,
I definitely will say like friendships, relationships. Those are the things that probably take the biggest toll. But I'm the kind of person though, like when I'm focused on something like running, that is my goal. Like that, everything in my life essentially revolves around that. So my friendships have actually mostly all come through running. Like we got to meet through running.
Shout out Sammy Gotts.
Yeah, I met so many great people, like Sammy, like my best friends right now, I met them all through running. Like I have some buddies of mine who I met in high school that we're still great friends. Like they don't run competitively or anything anymore. Yeah. But we met through that. So that's awesome. Running has been something that outside of just that competitive goal that I had in mind, it's a great way for me to visit people, get to meet people that I wouldn't normally get to meet, travel the world. So I love that aspect about running. So the relationship side of things, if anything, like I don't feel that I'm sacrificing. I think running has given me a lot on that front.
That's awesome.
Now the biggest thing is in terms of, I guess, more like relationships that aren't in that running, world. Like for instance, like my girlfriend, like spending time with her, or like maybe my family. Like there are sacrifices. Like for instance, like if my mom wants to visit family, I have family in Cuba, I have family in Ecuador.
What do you like better, Cuba or Ecuador?
I like Ecuador better. I mean, I was born there, and I was also.
Oh, you were born. Okay, because you have a citizenship too. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also the climate's much nicer. It's not hot.
Cuba.
Yeah, Cuba's like Caribbean, so it's very hot.
So your dad is Cuban?
No,
my dad is Ecuadorian.
Yes, and my mom's Cuban. So but yeah, like for me, like traveling, making those big trips, like I sometimes have to say no, I can't. Like I have to train. Because if I go out to, for instance, if I go out to Cuba, I've gone there before for 2 weeks to run and train, and it's just so hot that you can't really get any. Maybe this time of year it's fine if I'm not training too seriously. I can just go and be with family. But if I have a goal like the Olympic trials, and it's important, like I can't miss a step. Like I can't do it. Like so, the last few years that I've been having that goal in mind for the Olympic trials, I didn't really travel much. I kind of just stayed home, stayed around. What was familiar to me, and I just can't afford those distractions of having to go out with my family, which it's obviously it's in life you need balance and everything, but when you try to accomplish your goal as difficult as that, sometimes there can't be a balance. For me at least though, I think like with my girlfriend and everything, like I think I do a decent job of like when I go to see her, for instance, I'll still like spend time with her all day and everything like that. And if that means I have to run at 1 a.m. on the treadmill in her basement, I've done it countless times. Like I've done a 20-miler during Christmas time at 2 a.m. in her basement.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
After Christmas dinner?
And it was probably sometime that week. So like, and it's like, I still get it done because it's
you run 20 miles on a treadmill, oh my God.
At 2 a.m. and it's like all her family's sleeping and I'm down there running and then the next day I gotta get up and do the festivities, whatever it is.
It's so beautiful.
But it's, cause it's for me, like, again, like what I told you before, it's like you said, nobody cares. Like no one's gonna say, oh, like it's Christmas, you were with your family, you can take the day off. It's like, no, like my goal is not gonna like get any closer if I take days off like that. Now obviously if I'm in pain or if there's a hazard out in terms of the weather or whatnot, I'll be smart about it. But when it just comes down to me prioritizing my relationships over running, it's like, I think there's always a way to balance it. I feel like sometimes people feel like they can't balance it, but it's more of a cop out. Like it's just they don't want to run at 1 a.m. You know what I mean?
I love that you said that, because on the flip side, people say like, oh, I can't be in a relationship because I need to focus. But I feel like if you really want, you can make anything
If you
work.
really want a relationship and you want to be a good runner, you can make it happen. Like it's not impossible. Like sure, if you have way too many, like you don't want to spread yourself thin.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm always telling people in terms of advice. Like don't try to be really great at multiple things, because it's just not gonna. You need to choose 2 or 3 things and make that your priority. But that's my case. Like if you just have those priorities, like I have my relationship with her, my personal running, and then now my job, my career. That's all I need. Like I don't need any outside stuff. So, like so me personally, like I don't go out. Like I don't go out, drink. Or
is that a sacrifice, or is that just like?
It's not a sacrifice. I just
don't
have
care.
I don't have any like what for me at least. Like I don't get anything out of it.
You
like,
never smoked, right? Like, you never
No.
smoked a cigarette or like a joint. Like we talked about it one time.
Because I don't know. For me, like like during college, there was like we would go out like with my teammates and whatnot, and I would just usually sit there and be like. I don't know, like this is not fun for me. Because I'm like, I'm not getting better. Like, you know, I'm here when probably should be sleeping, so that I can recover and the next morning go out and train.
Yo.
So I just kind of like there'd be times where I'm just sitting there, kind of like almost like detached from everything, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't get anything.
That's like a real tunnel vision. That's incredible.
And there was actually a big turning point for me when I went to Florida State in 2021. For graduate school, I was kind of at a point where with running, I was a little bit burnt out in terms of I had a successful season, like I had a successful like training season and a racing season, but I kind of like felt physically and then mentally burnt out.
Yeah.
So I took about a month of no running. That was just personal, just like no running, just to kind of recoup. And then when I got to Florida State, I kind of started training again. And when I was there, like the first few weeks, you know, it's like syllabus week, people are going out to bars and stuff. And I went out just to kind of meet my classmates and things like that. And, you know, it was maybe fun like 1 or 2 times, but I remember like about the 3rd time that I went out with them, I was standing in a bar and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I was like, I told myself like, hey, like you can't tell yourself all these things about the Olympics and stuff and be here at 1 a.m. Like, what do you think the guy that's going to be in the Olympics with you in 4 years, 8 years, he's not here at 1 a.m. You know, he's training or sleeping or whatever.
So it's like choosing like what do you really want?
Make the decision. Yeah. And in my case, I'm not even that talented for me to make something like an Olympics. It's like, that's like a Hail Mary pipe dream. So for me to make that happen, in my opinion, I have to work even harder than the guy who has that as an option or who has that in his or her future. So I'm like, right then and there, I remember I was at a bar and I was like, tomorrow, like that's it. Like I'm not hanging out with these people again.
Good for you.
And that's what I did. I like didn't hang out with that whole group again. And it wasn't like they're good people. Like, but it was just like, in my opinion, it was just like they're not bringing anything to me in terms of what my goal is.
Yeah,
like
no, that's a real boss mentality.
Like they're great people and they're like fun and like I'm sure, but it's just like my goal is to qualify for the Olympic trials. What am I gonna do to get there? And then next day I got up, I ran twice that day, and then I started during my time in Florida. Actually, is where I built up my mileage. To that
those
ridiculous
clowns
number.
Inspired you to go kind of.
No, they're not clowns. Like in my opinion, like to each their own. Like if you like to go out and have fun, do it. You know, your life is your life, and at the end of the day, like all these kind of like goals and things, it's all like, in my opinion, they're all like illusions. Like something like making the Olympics, or or Olympic trials, or whatever it might be. Like it's just something to aim towards, but it could be, in my opinion, it's all arbitrary. Like it could be writing a book, it could be being an artist, it could be making music, it could be whatever. In my opinion, as long as you're doing something that you can express yourself and you can create something that you're proud of and kind of leave your mark in the world in some way, that's all it is. So it doesn't matter what the goal is. It just so happens that I like running because that's what I'm doing.
You sound like Rick Rubin. I don't know if you know who he is. Rick Rubin is this like guru basically
Yeah.
in LA that a lot of artists, particularly rappers, go to when they feel stuck or like blocked. And he just wrote this book that half of it I read, half of it I listened to, and he talks about creativity and essentially how like every single person is a creative and you create your own reality. And this guy is so incredible. Like he basically says what you just.
I mean, in my opinion, just being a human being, right, is there's a creative component to that, because you're creating things, you're creating experiences with other people and within yourself that are unique, like had never occurred. Like and I always like to tell people, like for instance, like there's never going to be another you ever again. When you die, that's it. So there's something novel and there's something unique to you being an individual. And whatever you do, you're creating something that's never been done before. You know, if you run a marathon, that's never been done before in the sense that you've never ran a marathon before. So that's something new. That's something the world hasn't seen.
That's awesome.
So in my opinion, again, like everyone has that creative capacity. It's just a matter of maybe fine tuning it to express yourself in the way that you want to express yourself. So for me, I love running. So I want to commit myself to that. In my opinion, going out and having fun, right, is cool and all, because it obviously gives you time to like decompress and kind of enjoy time with other people. But the reason why for me it hasn't always been so appealing is because I don't feel that I'm actually putting my effort into something that is creative or something that is expressing myself. Like that's just not me.
Yeah.
Some people like to party and like that's literally who they are.
Yeah.
Like they like
that's
to
their form of
that's
their self-expression.
Yeah, that's their
right?
expression.
Yeah.
Like they're uplifting the world around them by creating that positivity that's in a nightclub or might be at a festival, right? Or at a concert. Like that's just not me. Like I go to a concert and I'm like, I could listen to this on my AirPods while I run, you know?
That's totally. I wanted to ask you about your playlist, but I
Sure,
wanted to ask you about something else more.
Cool.
So, this is maybe a little bit controversial, but
Sure.
we know that we already spoke about this, that in order to become a really great athlete or a great anything, you gotta have discipline, and especially when it comes to like runners, there's like sleeping, recovery, nutrition, and just like all these things, right? Now, with what's been happening in the world right now, we see that like there's a lot of people transitioning from one gender to another,
Sure.
and that's really great that they have the opportunity to do so. But when it comes to competitive sports, when let's say a girl is like you, who's like really, really trying, and she's getting better and better, and like, how do you feel? What is your opinion on that? Like, do you think it's fair for men transitioning into women to be competing with women in sports?
All right. I mean, it's funny. Like, I actually wrote a page. So I was just a little bit of a preface here. In college, I studied psychology and philosophy. Like, those were my majors. So I actually, for a philosophy paper where we had to talk about, I believe it was like an ethics paper, I decided to address that issue. And it's funny because I kind of like decided on that issue because I saw that it was something that was connected to my sport, running. And back then it wasn't as big of a, controversy or issue, because now it's more so. My opinion was just, I think that it's really silly that because the biggest issue here is that there seems to be a semantic ambiguity around what a man and a woman is, right? A lot of people just don't agree on that. Like, for some people, your gender, right, is independent from your sex. For other people, they might hold the opinion that they're one and the same, right? In my opinion, the way we just address this issue once and for all is if you just get rid of the categories being men and women, just label them, in my opinion, X and Y or whatever, so that it
chromosomes.
Yeah, it comes down to what your chromosomes are, because at the end of the day, your sexual identity, your gender identity, that's not what's relevant. What's relevant is your phenotype or your biology. That's going to be. It doesn't matter, for instance, like if a man takes all the hormone replacement therapy that exists in the world. The fact that their body is structured a certain way, the fact that their hips are in a different position, that's going to help them run a little bit faster. That's going to help them jump a little bit higher. So at the end of the day, it's like, I think the way we address it is like, it's not about being a man or woman or whatever you're into sexually. It's about what your biology is. And that you could be, if you want to if you want to identify as man or woman or whatever in between. I'm not too familiar with the categories, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what your biology is, and that you can't ever change that. No matter how much surgery you do. I mean, we just don't have the technology yet. Maybe in 100, 200, 300 years, we might be able to completely change someone's structure. Who knows? But until then, I think it's a matter of, we just need to have the categories be independent of gender. We need to get rid of men and women and just have it be X and Y. And you could have, in my opinion, in the X category, Y category, you can have people who are transgender, you can have people who are men or women or non-binary compete in that Y division.
I think so too. The third, like a third category, go females, males, and then non-binary.
Just two. You just need two. In my opinion, now.
I see what you're saying. So they would still be under.
Yeah. So, like for instance, if you're someone who was born male and transitioned, I'm sorry, if you're someone who was born male and just transitioned to female, later on, you would still participate in the Y category. Now, I think that there's definitely, it's not a one-off, it doesn't fix everything, because like, what if you want to take the hormones or maybe the hormone suppressants? I'm not too familiar with the science behind that. I think in that case, if you want to maybe do these surgeries or replacement therapies that might alter your performance. For instance, if you're a woman, you might take testosterone, which is going to give you a competitive advantage. But that advantage is not going to be enough to where you can compete with the men still.
Yeah, never.
But the thing is that you have that advantage, you won't be able to fairly compete against the women or the X category.
Yeah.
So I think maybe in that sense, if you want to undergo that therapy, there might be a place for a third division.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like X and Y would be maybe like the clean, like no hormones, but it's just independent of your gender identity. And then maybe a third division if you're undergoing treatment like that.
Yeah. Sorry, Albie, we are at time, but just wanted to congratulate you on your move to Utah, representing Nike. That's so awesome.
Wearing the Nike stuff.
Yes, very good summary shirt. And one last question is, what's my name?
Dutchess. There you go.